am still learning Zoom somehow this far into Zoom Live. Thank you, I see some thumbs up. Thank you all for joining us. I'm going to get started just laying out some kind of Zoom rules. As I mentioned, there is transcription available. If you go to the bottom of your Zoom menu, you can enable it there. We are going to be recording the event tonight, so just wanted to let anyone know if they don't want to have their camera on or whatnot, but we are going to record and it will later be available on our YouTube page for those who couldn't make it or who just enjoyed themselves so much they want to watch it again. Please, gentle reminder to keep your mic muted while our wonderful speakers are speaking. We're going to have a few different presenters tonight, and then we'll do questions at the end. So questions, Q&A, conversation, it should be something that you should feel free to interact in as you wish. And with regards to that, you can at any point drop your questions in the chat. You can direct those to everyone or direct it to me directly. You're also welcome to email me at archive@gaycenter.org. It's archive without an S at gaycenter.org. And I will be compiling those questions for the end. And then once we're in that Q&A portion, we'll also invite anybody to use the raise hand feature on Zoom. And after which we will turn it over to you to ask your question over video or audio. So whatever way you like, okay? And before I introduce myself and the Center Archive and the Center at large, I want to start with land acknowledgement. The land from which I come to you tonight is part of the traditional territory of the Lenape-Hoking. The Lenape people lived in harmony with one another upon this territory for thousands of years. During the colonial era and early federal period, many were removed west and north, but some also remain among the continuing historical tribal communities of the Powhatan, or of the region, excuse me. These include the Nanticoke Lenni Lenape Tribal Nation, the Ramapo Lenape Nation, and the Powhatan Lenape Nation, the Nanticoke of Millsboro, Delaware, and the Lenape of Cheswold, Delaware. We acknowledge the Lenni Lenape as the original people of this land and their continuing relationship with their territory. In our acknowledgement of the continued presence of Lenape people in their homeland, we affirm the aspiration of the great Lenape chief Tamanend that there be harmony between the indigenous people of this land and the descendants of the immigrants to this land, quote, as long as the rivers and creeks flow and the sun, moon, and stars shine. And I do want to thank the Nanticoke Lenni Lenape Tribal Nation for making this statement available for use. Now, I want to start off with a little center info. So myself, my name is Caitlin McCarthy. My pronouns are they, them, theirs, and I'm the archives manager at the LGBT Center. The center opened its doors in 1983 and continues to exist to provide a safe haven, social and health services, and a place to build community and culture for LGBTQ New Yorkers. The Center Archive was established in 1990 by Richard Wandel, a volunteer archivist, as a way to preserve, document, and provide access to queer history created by and for our community. Materials in our collections run from as early as 1878 to the present day and are made up of a variety of media, including paper, photographs, audio and video recordings, pamphlets and printed materials, posters, and born digital records. Our holdings include personal papers and the records of organizations, newspapers and magazines published throughout the world, and the organizational papers of the center itself. So our building remains closed currently, but we are very much here to serve and connect our community. Many of our services and programs are operated remotely, and our phone lines remain open during business hours. You can find more info on our site, and we're going to drop some links in the chat. So one of the other things I get to do as the archives manager at the center is be so lucky to partner with folks in our community on various projects. And the one that I am so excited to tell you about tonight is in the new exhibition, Homoscopes, Queer Spirituality and Symbolism in 1970s Lesbian Print. And this beautiful online exhibition was curated by archive volunteer and my dear, dear pal, Rachel Picken, who I'm going to introduce now. Rachel Picken is a graduate student in museum studies and public history with a focus on queer history and interpretation. She is, as mentioned, a volunteer with the LGBT Community Center National History Archive, and she teaches history in New York City. Her research interests include historical memory, public history, and women and gender in the 20th century United States. It is my great honor to turn it over to Rachel.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Caitlin. I am so excited for this evening. Homoscopes has been like the perpetual quarantine project. A couple years ago when we first started thinking about it, it was like a little seed, and then actually in a curatorial class that I was taking, I was developing it a little bit more. And this was before COVID. So Caitlin and I had these plans that we were going to hang this on the gallery wall in the archives, and we were going to highlight certain collections, and then COVID happened. And then we still thought we were going to hang it on the wall because we had no idea how long we'd be in quarantine. And then we turned it into a digital exhibition, which I have never done before, but I think it's pretty cool that it could reach maybe more people. On the About page, there's a little bit of an origin story of Homoscopes, but I just want to expand on that slightly because I think it's relevant to probably a lot of the conversation we're going to be having tonight. A couple years ago, 2018, we were really like swimming in historical research surrounding the 50th anniversary of the Stonewall riots. And we were preparing for that, and we were participating in this monthly queer history meetup group. And one night a conversation was sparked about spirituality and the connection between radical activism in the United States. And this was something that was really personal to me because of where I'm from. I grew up in Buffalo, New York. And throughout my life, I went very frequently to a place that maybe many of you are familiar with, a place called Lily Dale. It's about an hour and a half outside of Buffalo, and it's a place for mediumship and spirituality and such. I myself grew up as a confused Christian, I would say, but Lily Dale was a real cornerstone of my belief system, and it really made an impact on me. So why is this relevant? Because in 2018, I actually found myself going back to Lily Dale really quite seriously. I was working through some personal trauma. I was coming out of a really long-term relationship, and I started speaking with people at Lily Dale again, and along with like people at the center and other people in my life, it just really helped me move through that time period. Regarding the project, this really impacted the way that I started to read the print of the era. Just having these pages filled with conversations, really complicated conversations around, yes, race and gender and spirituality, and really thinking through the ways that people were using those pages for information, yes, for healing, for so many different things. And that definitely impacted me. There were a couple projects I just want to mention that really impacted my way of thinking about this. Rachel Corbin's Wide World of Lesbian Cats, which is still hanging on the wall at the center because of COVID. It'll be there forever. But Rachel's work in thinking about like decentering Stonewall when we're talking about queer history is really important because so many public institutions choose that as the way in which they teach queer history. That's really powerful to think about. There is a historian, Jamie Harker, who wrote a book called Lesbian South. She talks a lot about sinister wisdom in it. In the introduction of that book, she's talking about the Southern perspective and the women in print movement. She addresses a lot of her preconceived notions about lesbian feminism, especially, and that really impacted the way that I was thinking about this topic and moving through Homoscopes research. And it was really powerful. There's a couple of other books that I'll drop in the chat for folks in case you want to check them out. There have been many people who have supported the research and helped so many people in this room. My partner, Megan Garmany, has put up with so much of my teaching, grad school, putting the exhibition together. I love you and thank you for the support. And thank you, Caitlin. Also, disclaimer, none of this would happen tonight the way that it is without Caitlin. This is Caitlin's doing, the creativity, everything. So powerful, as is so much of what you see on the website. So I'm really excited for tonight, and that's about it for now. So Cassidy, I'm gonna toss it over to you.
Well, I'm going to interrupt to say thank you for those sweet, sweet words. And it's been a real joy, even also a real intense thing to put together an exhibition during this time. But I wouldn't trade it for anything. I'm going to do the honors of introducing our wonderful moderator tonight. Cassidy Scanlan is a queer writer, teacher, and astrologer. Their consultation and facilitative practice is centered on collaborative synthesis, bridging gaps between intellectual discourse and lived experience. She aims to use her art and astrology platform as a way to help others engage with shadow work, framing struggle as an empowering and self-affirming process. You can find them on Instagram at Mercurial Musings, which I will be dropping in the chat. But more importantly, you can find them here with us tonight. Take it away, Cassidy.
Thank you so much, Caitlin, for that introduction. Hi, everyone. I'm Cassidy. I'm currently located in Seminole and Tocobaga Territory, otherwise known as Spring Hill, Florida. I'm really excited to be here and commune in this magical virtual space together. And I first want to just talk a little bit about what Sinister Wisdom, which I'm a volunteer at. So Sinister Wisdom is a multicultural lesbian literary and art journal that publishes 4 issues each year. Publishing since 1976, Sinister Wisdom works to create a multicultural, multi-class lesbian space. Sinister Wisdom seeks to open, consider, and advance the exploration of lesbian community issues. The journal recognizes the power of language to reflect our diverse experiences and to enhance our ability to develop critical judgments as lesbians evaluate our community and our world. Currently, Julie R. Enzer is the editor of Sinister Wisdom. Sinister Wisdom also hosts numerous virtual events such as readings, open mics. We've had book clubs and writing workshops as well. For our summer 2021 issue, I'd like to share Eruptions of Ainana, Justice, Gender, and Erotic Power by Judy Grahn, co-published by Nightboat Books. If you are interested in learning more about Sinister Wisdom and our awesome new issue, you can visit sinisterwisdom.org. And now I'm going to be introducing our first speaker tonight, Krista Venora. Krista Venora is an Afro-Indigenous, trans, non-binary, queer, spirituous witch, and psychic medium. Born on a full moon in Long Beach, California, they have always been close to the veil and now live in their purpose as one of its guardians. A gifted channel, Krista focuses on offering guided meditations, spirit world journeys, and spirit channeling sessions to their community via pink opal magic. Heart-centered, open-minded, and an ever-changing Gemini, Krista is here to help you fly. Let's give a warm welcome to Krista.
Hello, thank you. Thank you so much. I have to share, it at this point never gets any less weird to listen to a bio about yourself. So you could take that home. Just always strange. I am so happy to be here today. My practice and my personal life is really revolving around queer people, around my queer community. And I know that it's because we have so many specific spiritual needs. But what I want to focus on today for the next few minutes that I'm going to be chatting with you is one, a series of things I believe you already know, but I'm going to say to you anyways. And another is our queer root system, is our ancestors. And so, do you have queer ancestors? Trick question, of course, absolutely. We know that queer people have always existed. We're here talking about history. if we stick to sciencey explanations, we know that we see variance and diversity all over nature. And so many of our laws of physics are, they have variance, they have specific circumstances that make things somehow different or exceptions to the rules. And if we switch over to a spiritual point of view, mine specifically influenced by my Indigenous background and within a Spiritist framework, in my view, queer people are more than natural. We are necessary. We were always meant to be space holders, right? The creatives. And don't get me wrong, we know that there's creativity in math and tech and design, right? And engineering. But most of us, all of us, to generalize, I will, are here to experience life beyond any binary, right? To be expansive thinkers, to be expansive feelers. We are the masters of the in-between and the masters of the both and. We carry inherently the magic of paradoxes, of holding two seemingly opposite things as true. Right? That's our power. The power we have to go in between spaces and to live and thrive and create there. In my personal belief, I also think that we are born to communicate with the spirit world. I think that we are born to communicate with the spirits of the land, and beyond that, to deliver our interpretation, our channeling through of this information to the community so that we can learn to commune with the planet, that we can learn to commune beyond communicating with the spirits here and with the universe at large. That means, for me, that we really miss a big opportunity for connection and for purpose when we skip over, don't realize, or just don't pay enough attention to the queer ancestors that we have. In my belief, we have a spiritual lineage, of course. We have been living lives and we have experiences that we carry over. But of course, our bodies have had an experience as well. Our bodies are, and this part, science is caught up with. Our bodies are literally our ancestors. And if we gain and are born with things like generational trauma, then that means that we are also born with, gifted, and deliver generational gifts. And so part of this here is me offering an invitation to you that there is connection, that there is purpose, that there is power in speaking their names, people that you know you're related to, people that you aren't related to, and of however it is that you pray, may it be, on the ground with your eyes closed, as you're running, as you're swimming, as you're dancing, to pull up the gratitude and attention that we have inside of us, the love that we have, not only for things that have been sacrificed. I feel like it's easy to think of, oh, I'm grateful for the things that have been sacrificed for me. And I am every day. But we also must consider and learn to appreciate the acts of authenticity that they experienced, that they enabled us to have. Because for queer people to access their power, it is directly a battle because of the overculture, because of the society that we live in, right? And for us to live as authentically as possible, to uncover everything that is truly us outside of what the overculture says we should be, outside of our families sometimes crushing expectations of us, outside of other people trying to make us make sense to them. When we are able to see what is truly us and then purposefully live that way, That is not only accessing your true and deep power, your rooted power, it's also the ultimate way to honor all of the queer people that came before you. Every time you can say who you are out loud, even to yourself, every time you look in the mirror and you see the choices that you've made to maybe seem more alternative or to find your people, to get that haircut that makes you feel embodied and real, every time you see yourself making those choices and taking those actions, you directly give power and love and honor to all of the ancestors that sacrificed and also not. I want to invite you to realize also that not every queer ancestor that we have lived in shame and fear and suffered. If we go back beyond colonialism in the United States, we have peoples all over Turtle Island who were celebrated for who they are, right? Were seen as necessary, as the go-betweens between the spirit world and the mundane world. And so, again, I share this to not only give you a sense of belonging, which I think so many of us deal with right up front. It's like before coming out, after coming out, who am I? Who are my people? Where do I belong? And where can I find that? It's not that you are somehow extra or a mistake or just a circumstance, right? You're purposeful. There really isn't anybody in the world that isn't. And if there are all of us having these shared experiences, then for me, there really isn't any space for any other explanation besides that we are purposeful. And I think that that is beautiful. And I think that when we realize that we're purposeful, then we can kind of utilize our innate skills in community building, in mutual aid, right? In community care, in activism, in fighting for freedom all over, for fighting for truth everywhere. Because if we dig down to the very root of what all our activism, everything that we have been striving for, is freedom, absolutely. But underneath that is truth. And I'm very happy to be speaking in this community, especially with regard to these incredible astrological findings, right? And I'm not an astrologer, and I'll leave astrology to Alice, but I just want to share that we did not wiggle our way into astrology. We didn't wiggle our way and force space into witchcraft or magical practice or spirituality at all. It exists because of us. Now, I'm not a scholar, and I don't have the names, and I don't have the sexualities printed on the Babylonians and the Egyptians and the Greeks and the Romans and the people that created this system. But I can tell you from the way it makes me feel in my body, from me in meditation, meeting with ancestors, meeting with the queer spirits and the queer energies that are abundant in the spirit world, that it is a gift that queer people delivered, that everybody who has shot this future, shot this culture, all of the human race forward, every single time we expand in a beautiful and wholesome and equitable way, there are queer people behind it. So again, this is another way for me to say that queer people belong, that queer people are purposeful, that the world actually cannot get on without us. And it was never supposed to. And if all of us can be very, very brave, and if all of us can be very, very vulnerable and courageous enough to see ourselves for who we really are, underneath everything, underneath the piles and piles and piles of things that we have tried on, that we have said we moved on from, but have not excavated from us. When you actually embody that, when you live in that space, I almost don't even have words for the type of freedom that it allows you. For the feeling of interconnectedness, of belonging on the planet and in the stars. And in my view, humans literally are the middleman. We're the go-between. We literally crawled out of the earth and crawled out of the ocean, right? And we are of the stars. So that means that we're the ultimate manifestors. So I just want to say, and I'm wrapping it up here, I just want to offer you that your desire as a queer person in all of your life is your compass, is your arrow. And every time that you honor your desire, again, you are honoring your ancestors, and there is unlimited power in that action. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Krista. That was so affirming. I really appreciate that. So now I'll be introducing our next speaker, Christy Rhode Carrera. Christy Rhode Carrera is a Cuban-American artist, writer, and musician from Miami, Florida, by way of Brooklyn, New York. She's been publishing graphic novels and zines since the mid-90s and has illustrated countless books, records, movements, and her own music. Her most recent work, The Next World Tarot, in line with her memoirs, focuses on justice, radical love, and survival. Her art and music tackles mental health, sexuality, cultural identity, punk rock, and thriving in a broken world. For a full bio and works catalog, check crodecore.org. Let's give a warm welcome to Christy.
Christy, you're muted. Yeah.
Okay, I unmute. Does this work? Okay.
Good.
My internet just stopped working on my computer, so I had to transfer to my phone, and I wanted to make sure that you can see me okay, like my face, and it's not chopped off. Thank you so much, everyone, and I'm Christy Rhode. I'm coming to you live from colonized native Lenape territory in Brooklyn, New York. And before this started, we were all talking about how nervousness and excitement feel the same. And I don't know why. It's like, while, beforehand, I'm like, oh, I love speaking to people. I love being a TV show. And then now I'm just feel, after hearing Krista speak and hearing all that magical, important affirming words, I feel grounded and not like a TV show, which is such a big part of my connection to magic at all. And because I'm grounded, I'm suddenly nervous and excited, and I'm like shaking, and I don't know what to do with myself. But it's fine, because I feel very at home on a TV show. I'm a Gemini with a Cancer rising, so the distance is nice. But anyway, thank you so much. And I was just saying how the connection to magic is kind of what has enabled me to keep doing what I do. I wrote graphic novels and zines, and I write music, and that's what I've been doing for 20 something years. But there was this break during my Saturn return where I was just kind of like, what's the point of this? I need this other connection. I need all these things. And I just fell apart. And it was the worst time of my life. And just kind of, I didn't see the value in my art and what I do. And there's this meme going around that says, you are not the work that you do. And I'm like, and we can't gauge our value by the work that we do. and that's real, and I believe that. But we also have to acknowledge when some of us are just a bunch of work. You know, we don't have marriages and children and these. I have friends and community and family, but it's like, as far as the stuff I put out into the world, this is it. And so I am my work, and I'm very proud of that. And I think that with this past new moon and just all of the, you know, the pandemic, all the vaccines are happening, everyone's like kind of acting like everything's back to normal. And, you know, I live near Fort Greene, which I call Biden town. It's full of a lot of white liberal Democrats, and there's this energy of everything's finally okay, and it's not. And I think that constantly reminding us of that, or constantly being aware of that and being awoken to that truth, makes us angry, sad, vulnerable people. And that is how I have been, and I just feel very just disconnected from that, my role in the world as an artist, as a creator, and as, you know, doing these things that are very important, when I don't feel grounded, when I don't feel connected to ancestral magic. And as a queer Latina, I'm Cuban American, first generation. I grew up in Miami, and magic was this thing, was everywhere. You know, Catholicism and Santeria was just like this part of the culture, but it felt inaccessible. It felt like, you know, baby queers needed to go either to sports or to something, you know, anger. And I chose anger. I chose punk rock, and that was my life forever. And it was, and it was like magic, and it was what my ancestors gave me to heal and to pass the threshold where I didn't want to be on this planet. And I was like, you know, what is the point of being here with all these fucking Catholic Republicans everywhere, you know, trying to kill my magic? And then punk rock happens, and then I live, and then all, you know, everything's awesome. But then it gets to a point where I felt completely disconnected and completely lost. And then I just think of all these white celebrities that find magic, and like they find someone else's magic and they heal. And I'm like, that's not fair. I want to find my own magic. And so I did. And that is how my most recent project, The Next World Tarot, came out. And I actually didn't do a time check, so I would appreciate the little notice to stop talking, because I'm going to pull some cards for the reading and for the new moon and for all of us. And thank you so much to the center, to just, you know, the queer culture and just like the urge to live that exists in New York City and is just a part of New York City to me, as a, you know, as a transplant from Miami. And you know, I feel like being I live a very isolated life anyway, but the quarantine, and, you know, there not being events and there not being things, and has, you know, it's like you forget how amazing certain things are. And then now that things are happening again, and I'm just, you know, it's very nice that y'all are doing this, and thank you so much. I'm gonna pull some cards and almost stop talking. The Next World Tarot is my illustrated and written tarot deck about the end of the world as we know it. Well, this is nice. We got the Wheel of Fortune, which is so meaningful for what we're all doing. We're celebrating the exhibit. We're celebrating the spaces that honor, you know, hope and life and safety. When, you know, there is no safety. And I always feel like a mean Gen X. I'm from 82, but I identify as Gen X because in the 90s, I was having a very old person's lifestyle. Anyways, just that I just really identify with that whole, like, you know, like, create another world. Don't try to, you know, hold spaces accountable. Just fuck him and start a new space. And I just feel kind of jaded, and I kind of you know, but I don't really like to be that way. I want to be inspired by new generations, and I want to be inspired by all of the work being done by younger folks that is more nuanced and is not like this angry, I'm just going to be a punk rocker and that's how it is. And I'm so grateful that that's my core. I'm a Cancer rising and moon. You know, don't even try to find me a more eclectic wardrobe. But you know, it's a time to see what options we have and see what magic we have and see what's available to us, and not just the same old bullshit that we constantly go to because it's safe, which is, you know, totally valid that we do that. But sometimes when we, you know, just kind of let go of the things that are, you know, too safe, we're able to just reappreciate those things and see, oh, I'm gonna like step into all these spaces that used to piss me off, or I used to feel unwelcome. And now is the time to just reclaim those spaces and take up space, and not really, you know, continue in the same pattern of overly protecting yourself, being overly guarded. The 10 of Wands is all about being guarded and, you know, celebrating what you have, celebrating your life, enjoying your home. And but that was the quarantine. And now, you know, we don't want to get into that whole delusional, the world is saved all of a sudden because vaccine and Joe Biden, so everything's fine. We don't want to do that. But we do want to acknowledge that these new options do allow for us to kind of reclaim certain things that were taken away from us. And the pandemic was kind of the excuse. And then, you know, also reclaiming things that we learned, such as, you know, the fact that we live in such an ableist, terrible world. And then all of a sudden, nobody can go to work, nobody can do these things, but some things can still function. And the only problem is what the gatekeeper decides. You know, do we owe rent? Do we have to show up for work in real life? So don't be a shitty gatekeeper, and open doors for everybody, and don't be a shitty gatekeeper to yourself. You know, I'm gonna buy pants that are not black. It's gonna be awesome. And this is where I want to leave all of y'all. Some of my all-time favorite energy. The Queen of Wands features an amazing activist and artist, Rihanna Quigley, and it's all about this organic way of being a badass, owning your work, enjoying your work, being your work. It's okay to be your work, for your life to be your work, and for you to not have that many friends or a social life. That's fine. But as long as you're happy, and as long as you're like leaving the party early because you're like, you cannot stop daydreaming about that song, you know, and the person you wrote it about isn't even at the party. So like, why not go home and keep working? And the Queen of Wands is about that. It's about luxuriating in your truth and your magic and your achievements and the things that you deserve to enjoy, and also making space for other folks to do that. You know, not getting so stuck in your amazing life, to the point where you're kind of a jerk and you're kind of like, you know, like not aware of other people that are hurting, stuff going on in the world that's terrible, that kind of would benefit from happy people showing up and happy people doing the work. And the Queen of Wands is about that, is about being this very humble, healed, wounded healer, and surviving and living and being such a badass, but also understanding we're walking through a minefield. You know, the Joe Biden and the vaccine didn't save the world. Thank you so much, everyone. That's it for my piece.
Thank you so much, Christy. That was such a thoughtful card reading. So now I will introduce our last speaker of the event, Alice Sparkly Cat. Alice Sparkly Kat is a queer POC astrologer. They use astrology to rechart a history of the subconscious, redefine the body in the world, and reimagine history as collective memory. Their astrological work has been showcased at MoMA, Philadelphia Museum of Art, Brooklyn Museum, and Hauser and Wirth Gallery. They're friendly, located in Brooklyn, and available for readings. Alice's book, Post-Colonial Astrology, Reading the Planets Through Capital, Power, and Labor, was released yesterday from North Atlantic Books. Let's give a warm welcome to Alice Sparkly Katz.
Hello. Yeah, it's my turn to talk. Wait, can people hear me? Okay, cool. I'm gonna go to gallery view. I can see everyone. Cool. So hi, yeah, it's my turn to talk. Thanks for letting me take up some space here. And I mean, I'm so excited about the exhibition. And the reason is because I don't think we see a lot of queer history about astrology and tarot. Yeah, like there's such a lack of it. So I'm so excited that, you know, someone like put all this stuff together. I'm so excited to be here. That was so enjoyable hearing from Christy and Christy. I'm actually going to share a slideshow, and the reason is because I don't want you to see me. I don't like people to see my face. So if you don't want to follow a slideshow, like, you can close your eyes too. It makes no difference. It just helps me with, like, you know, being seen by other people. So let me just share my screen since I'm doing that. So I wanted to actually just talk to you about this book that I made called Post-Colonial Astrology. All you need to know about it is that it is a book. It's published by North Atlantic Books, which is a small nonprofit publisher, and that you can order it from my website. And that'll take you to Mil Mundus, which is an anti-gentrification project. And half of their profits go to mutual aid. So that's the best place to get it. And I wanted to, like, take you through the book a little bit. So, like, I've been kind of working on some of the concepts for the book for a couple years, and these are the guiding questions I started with. And the questions are like, and these always kind of come up when I work with people on astrology and community settings, in client work. And the questions that come up is like, well, like, you know, like Western astrology, it's not the only type of astrology that exists. So it's not a universal language. So the question is like, well, how does Western astrology work? And another question that comes up beside it, like just beside it, is like, if, like, is Western astrology really Western? It's like, a lot of Western astrology, it's a tropical system. So it's a very climate-based one. It normalizes like a certain climate. So then another question that comes up is, well, I mean, how, like, is this a Northern Hemisphere dominant system? Is this a settler colonial cosmology when it's being practiced over here on Turtle Island too? And then, yeah, I mean, and it's a climate-based system. So people always just ask, well, how is it changing? How is it changing because of climate change? Also geography. So I wanted to walk you through a little bit, and like what we're talking about is like popular astrology. It's the like the most popular kind, and that's the zodiac. It's where we use Aries through Pisces, and then we're talking about 7 gods, sometimes 10 if you use modern astrology. These 7 gods named after Roman gods. So, like, yeah, like looking at this, it's like, you get this feeling, why do we keep taking these Greco-Roman ideas and archetypes and like trying to apply them to everyone as if they're really universal? And this issue, it's not unique to astrology at all. It's actually like, it shows up everywhere. It shows up in terms of how we think about time. When we think about Paleolithic time, paleo actually means stone. So we talk about Paleolithic time without really referring to like the ages of the metals of the Romans, which is talking about like racial decay. And then we use words like genus to talk about, I mean, just some of our oldest non-human ancestors. We use the word like, family to refer to like how we group like living organisms. Animal comes from this Latin word that means to breathe. The way we talk about emotions are also like extremely Greco-Roman. Like the word depression, it has this Latin root. It means to press down. Yeah, and like melancholy, it's more medieval, but it's associated with Black humor. Paranoia, we're talking about of two minds in the noose of minds, and that has a Latin root also. So it's almost like with like so much of these languages, it has this like very like Roman flavor. And then going deeper into astrology, I don't know how much y'all know about astrology, but it's split into two types of planets. It's split between the diurnal sect and the nocturnal sect, and everything that we know about the sun and moon, about Jupiter or Venus or Saturn, Mars, like that's about sect. And the way that these planets work is that they also describe the signs. All we know about the signs is coming from the behaviors of the planets. So sect is very, very like kind of troublesome. It's about the divide between fate and fortune. So you might see fate as being translated as spirit or daemon. And then fortune is about form. Fortune is about the material substances that make up the world. Fate is usually seen to be more abstract. So from here, like you kind of see how these concepts grow. Fate, it talks about language and abstraction. Form, like the moon, it's about the body. It's about material life. And then there's this divide between political life and reproductive life showing up. It's a very gendered divide. In her work, Sylvia Wynter actually talks about this. She talks about astrology and she names it as an ethnoastronomy. And she also names it as an ethnogeography. So what she says is, she says all such knowledges of the physical cosmos, all such astronomies, all such geographies, whatever the vast range of human needs that they had successfully met, the range of behaviors that they had made possible, indeed, however sophisticated and complex the calculations that they had enabled to be made of the movements in the heavens, had still remained adaptive truth for in such ethnoastronomies, ethnogeographies. What she means by this is that she's saying that split that we saw between fate and fortune, it's not so much about gender, the modern concept of gender, but she calls it a colonial divide. And she's saying that this divide between spirit and flesh, it's positioning the true Christian self, I spelled Christian wrong, so in opposition to the other. And the way that she's doing this, she's looking at it across time, but she's also looking at it in terms of geography. She's saying, hey, like, things that are closer to us, like with the moon, they're compared to like kind of changing realities, and that's known things that's within God's realm. And then things that are uninhabitable, things that are constant, unchanging, that's outside of God's realm. That has a lot to do with how we think about time. She's not making this up. If you look at Ptolemy's second book in his Tetrabiblios, and Ptolemy writes about race in astrology. His first volume is dedicated to universal astrological concerns, but then he goes further and he talks about particular astrological concerns. And he's doing this thing, he's like, everything that I just talked about in that first volume, about signs, about planets, about these kind of generalized things, he's saying that they're based on observable differences that he sees in people based on geography. And these things, he's saying, well, inhabitants to the west, they're like wilder. He's saying that people from the east are more sinister. He's saying that people who live to the south, south to him, they're like hot in disposition. People who are more northern to him, they're wild in manners. And he kind of erases himself. He thinks of himself as a neutral point. So there's a lot of like overlapping between astrology and race. And the reason why is because race is a very magical system. At its very beginning, race is a religious system. There's also something that a lot of people say, which is the idea that Western astrology isn't really Western. And this is like this is something that's built into how we think about Western astrology too. If you look at this Roman guy Lucian, this is from Volney's The Ruins of Empire, saying, well, yeah, you know, astrology, like whenever you see Ethiopia, it's actually just referencing all of Africa. And he's saying it's coming from Africa, it's passed through the Egyptians to the Romans. If you look at one of the fathers of modern astrology, Alan Lael, he wrote this book called Esoteric Astrology, and he keeps referencing India. The first sentence, he's like, I got all this stuff from this book from India, but he never references a single Vedic astrologer, Indian astrologer, and he never references a single Vedic technique in his whole book. And this person, Joanna Komorowska, is saying, well, traveling to Egypt, like that's actually like, it's a long tradition in Greek literature. And a lot of Greek astrologers, they did that in order to distinguish themselves from the more political philosophers. So it's something that it's like, you know, people, Valens will say, I went to Egypt, I was struck by this like knowledge that the Egyptians are just like kind of like corrupting, I was able to save it. So this idea, it's built into Western astrology's kind of origin story. There's this really fantastic book called The Intimacies of Four Continents, where Lisa Lowe looks at the material history of an English tea ceremony. And she's saying, hey, this like ceremony that's seen as like so English, so quintessentially English. Well, the sugar, they're from the West Indies. The tea in China, they're imported from China. The tables, that's wood from the West Indies. All the cotton dresses at the time that she's looking at, these are from India too. So she's saying that this ritual, it seemed to be Western, but all the materials that build it, that you know, yeah, these materials, they're not Western. So like the West, like it's not a real thing. It's actually an imagined thing that people of color are forced to build. So that's how we think about Western astrology. Western astrology is not Western in origin, but it's Western in how it's remembered. And that shows us something that's really important, which is that language doesn't remain loyal to its origin, but it's inherently treacherous. One of the root words for the word translation is actually treason. Yeah, to be trans is to be treasonous. In astrology, it's a language. It's not a religion, it's not a cult, it's a language that's being used and it's changing as it's used. So the question I just kind of wanted to like end the book with, and we start with the three, they're never answered, and the language, or sorry, the question I want to end it with is just, well, if astrology is a language and language is treacherous, so like, yeah, what can we use astrology to talk about? Like, how do we want to use it? So that's all I have prepared. Yeah, thanks for the time.
That was awesome. Thank you so much, Alice, for that thought-provoking presentation. So now I'd like to invite all our speakers and Rachel, the curator of Homoscopes, for a conversational Q&A. So if you have questions for our presenters, pop them in the chat. Also, Caitlin had her email in there as well that you can email that to or send directly to Caitlin for questions. But the first one I noticed is that somebody was asking, Alice, while you were presenting, if you could speak more about how binary the astrology can sound. Can you speak more on that and your thoughts?
Oh, sure. Yeah, there's a couple of different binaries in Western astrology. There's the oppositions between different signs. There's sect, which like sometimes it's described in terms of gender, masculine and feminine planets. But then there's also rulership. There's domicile planets, and then there's like, sometimes it's called like exiled planets. So then there's issues of citizenship too. So there's a couple of different binaries.
Yeah, how do you reconcile those binaries, especially because I think a lot of how Western astrology is framed is emphasizing that, maybe to the point of overemphasizing in doing the work for your book. How are you sort of able to like maybe find the gray space or honor both, or just what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, my thoughts is that Western astrology, it can do something really specific, which is like, it's really good at like, when we use it, it can talk about our wounds. So it doesn't talk about who we are in general. It doesn't talk about who you are essentially, but it's really good at looking like, hey, how does this binary system of gender impact you? How do you, how have you experienced the system? So it's really good at talking about pain, but it's not so good at talking about other things.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So I wanted to throw a question over to Rachel. Someone asked, why did you focus on the 1970s in the research for Homoscopes? Did you find materials from other decades?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think when we were initially starting some of the phases of research around the commemorative activity for Stonewall, the zines and the publications and so much of the print in the post-Stonewall era are like coming from the 70s. That's informing a lot of our knowledge about activism of the era. But the reality of this project also is that like I have had to, and Caitlin too, has had to do so much research with digitized materials. So that has meant like COVID has closed everything. And unless you are like one of the wonderful people in the room, I'm looking at some of you right now who have either sent me a source, allowed for your art to be exhibited, things like that, then everything we have on the website is through sources that have been digitized. And a lot of because there was so much excitement around that post-Stonewall era, a lot of those sources have been digitized. There's so much from other eras. One of the most interesting things that people have sent me, Saloni, she's not here, from the One Archives, she sent me digitized pages from an astrologer who was working in California with AIDS patients in the later 80s. The list goes on and on and on. So to limit the scope so that people could maybe get an entry point into the topic, we chose Lesbian Print of the 70s. But our hope for the project is that, it's inclusive, it's built, and we like further explore this for everyone within the queer community and in other eras too. So that was part of it.
Thank you, Rachel. And a quick follow-up question. Someone was also curious if there was any pieces that you couldn't include in the exhibition that you wish were there.
It's a really good question. Caitlin, I'm going to go for it. So I am learning how to do public history right now. We can't just take someone's art or a poem, slap it up on a website and just go for it. Everything that you see involves emails, permissions, things like that. Unfortunately, for example, with someone whose work meant so much to the research and to so many people in this room, like Audre Lorde. There have been so many people who have abused Audre Lorde's work online, misusing her poetry, things like that. So someone like Audre Lorde and the Audre Lorde estate, unfortunately, didn't give permission for Audre Lorde's work to be exhibited. So there's been a couple of examples like that. People want to know how you're going to use it, the narratives that you're going to be telling. It's different than writing an article or something that is like not on the internet and public facing. And that has been really, really interesting for me. The permissions process actually has been really fun sometimes. And then in that example has been, a little bit sad, but I understand. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Rachel. So I have a personal question for Krista. I'm really struck, Krista, by how you spend a lot of your work is about helping people, guiding people connect with their queer and trans ancestors. And I was wondering, how do you think that someone can make this communion or connection with their queer and trans ancestors as a daily practice, as opposed to something that you just like do once during like some week? Like, how can that be an everyday practice to connect to?
Yeah, excellent. I love that question. Beyond, I think the best thing to do is absolutely have a dedicated space, a dedicated altar that is for your queer and trans ancestors. Now, we don't all have the cultural context or space or time for something like that. So beyond that, which is absolutely the best way to have, a connection, because, you know, when that candle's on, they're like, you're there. Okay, I know it. Like, we're doing it every Sunday. We get it. We know it. Stuff like that. But beyond that, like I was saying, when we are actually focused and attentive on the things that we do in our everyday life that are either directly because of somebody's sacrifice or somebody's battle, and even looking in the mirror and saying, like, I love my nose, is connection and creation and communion with the ancestors. But the biggest secret, and I think that most people don't talk about, is that all you really have to do is speak aloud. With the way that at least in my belief and my experience with the way that the spirits work, you could do nothing but speak aloud to them. And you can journal, you can write it down, it's just as effective, but there is something, I think, that changes when in your body when you are, if it's safe and available for you to do so, when you are able to speak aloud. And you don't have to, you know, have anything planned or write a letter, right? You don't have to say, dear queer ancestors, right? You can literally say, kind of in the way that people use Jesus's name. They're like, oh, praise Jesus. Like, you can literally do that. You just say, praise the queer ancestors. I'm happy to be at this mixer. You know what I'm saying? It creates more ripples and actually does have an effect in the spirit realm when we speak. That's why prayer is so widely accepted as the main communication method with the spirits. It's why it's all over. It's because it's effective. You don't have to pray in a way that's going to make you feel triggered by, you know, religious trauma. It doesn't have to look like anything. But when we speak to them, it crafts a connection. And just like something like prayer, when you first do it, it's just going to feel silly and like you're talking to no one. But then upon repetition, especially if you say a certain set of words the same way over and over again, at some point, the feeling shifts and you start to realize that something's happening and someone's listening, you know? So it was a long way to say prayer, but basically prayer.
I love that. That's so simple and so powerful at the same time. And Chris, I have one more question for you. I'm really struck how you sort of have this balance of personal nourishment or spiritual transformation and how you connect that to community. I was doing some research and I noticed you recently opened up an Opalite subscription, which you framed as community spiritual development. I'm wondering about your thoughts on how can we practice witchcraft or spirituality in a way that nourishes the self, but not prioritizes it? How can we also nourish our communities?
Oh, I love that. Yeah, that's an excellent question. It's what I'm all about. In my view and in my experience, magic and witchcraft is stronger. It takes a very deeply rooted effect when we are more concerned with our communities and the people around us. Now, not every witch prays, but like I said, I'm a praying lady. And the first thing that comes out of my mouth is about the marginalized people, about feeding the hungry, about, you know, sheltering the cold. And beyond just prayer and beyond magical practice, I think that witchcraft is about creating change in our actual mundane world. And so when we are actually interested and vulnerable enough to see the ways in which witchcraft can actually change our lives and the lives of those around us, we are actively interested in the well-being of other people. I think that when you engage in a magical practice, when you engage in witchcraft, you will not be fulfilled without the community aspect. That doesn't mean you have to be in a coven, you have to be magicking with other people, but you will constantly be chasing something that will never be fulfilled if you are not also concerned with the well-being of the planet and the people around you. Witchcraft and magic only exists for us and for the planet. In my opinion, humans are here specifically to tend the land. We're here for the planet. And so I think the answer to the question is that witchcraft does that on its own, and not that there are punishments and not that there are tests and some kind of grand lawmaker. But I think that when you consistently prioritize yourself beyond just what you are entitled to and what you deserve as a human being, when you consistently prioritize yourself and don't have space for anyone else, it does start to feel shallow. It does start to take more of your energy than necessary, and the sacrifices you have to make to get what you want become more and more extreme. So not only do I think it fulfilling to focus your magic and your magical practice on not only yourself but your community, I think that magic itself kind of like fungi keep the checks and balances in the world.
Yes, thank you, Krista. I love how basically you're saying that that is inherent to witchcraft, to practice in a community space as well as individual. So I want to go over to Christy. Christy, I love your punk rock energy. I also noticed that you have the words love and rage tattooed on your hands. And I really want to ask you, like, where is the space for anger to exist in spiritual communities? Especially I've noticed this sort of like hyper positivity that we often see in pop spirituality. And I feel like you'd be a really good person to ask, like, where can we make room and space for those angry, uncomfortable feelings? Oh, we can't hear you yet, Christy. You're muted.
Hey.
There we go.
Oh, I said it in my apartment. You're all welcome to come over and be pissed. And no, I agree that I definitely felt very alienated from all spirituality, because it just felt like that new age vibe of like, you know, everything's okay as long as you center yourself. And yeah, in theory, when I have connected with my ancestral magic, which was a huge deal for my healing, for getting over dark times, for actually finishing my tarot deck and getting back into writing novels and doing my thing. It was like very necessary for me to access you know, that these ideas of like groundedness and breathing and taking care of yourself and elevating your most powerful purpose over your insecurities, your pain, your trauma. But sometimes that trauma and the people that cause it are just going to keep ruining your life. And until you like do that work of going to therapy, having community, having, you know, like, I feel I relied on partnership and love my whole life for that healing. And then I actually got a palm reading when I was 22 that said I wasn't going to have love until I was 40. And I'm 39. Hey, Leo, where are you? And so when I'm 40-ish, you know, I'm going to have this love. And it was a sick palm reading. Like this woman went off on like my dad, like all this stuff I knew. And I was like, oh, and this is when I was like punk only, no spirituality. I thought it was all froofy. I thought it was all fake. And this was my first, you know, my first moment of like, oh my God, there is something in the ether. You know, there is like, when I feel the energy of my great grandma, who was at the time, you know, was my great grandma and my grandpa were like the deceased family members. And then I had a lot of deceased friends. Like I had a lot of friends pass away when I was in high school, and I was about, you know, high school and that time. And so I'm 22, and this is the first time where I'm like, oh my God, I'm connecting to the magic. I'm connecting to all these things. And so for her to tell me that, I was like, my life is going to suck for the next 20 years. Like, and I didn't listen. You know, I had my toxic love affairs, and I wrote novels about them, and I wrote songs about them. And it's all my chart. All of this, my chart says that I am meant to have this chase for years. I'm a Venus Aries, and just have toxic emotional. And so I got to a point where I was like, well, I have to stop being so angry. I have to just embrace the positivity and all this stuff, because that connection to my ancestors, to my magic, to my culture, it cleared the fog. And I was able and I was like, oh my God, for a minute, I'm like, God, were these new age people right? Should I go listen to Enya? Like, what is this? And it's like, no, that's not my magic. I'm gonna go listen to Celia Cruz, like classic Celia Cruz, where she's like singing about the orishas, and like, I'm gonna like listen to music that is made by my ancestors. And I feel like that, like, finding that positivity was the only way that I was able to navigate the rage and the anger with this new, more enlightened, happier version of myself. Because that's the thing, it's like, I think we need to make space for those really angry days and that really angry energy of like, fuck the system, fuck my boss, fuck the racism, fuck your racist grandma, like Splendid Raincoat t-shirt, check them out. But yeah, it's just like these very important sentiments that we are seeing, and it's part of awakening the world, So it's like, how do we integrate that into like self-care and healing? And a big part of that is acknowledging that, what does self-care and healing looks like? It's not like going to like a peace circle and loving each other. Like, that's a part of it, but then you also have to go to therapy and cry for like 9 years, and then you have to do some DMT and like freak out about your trauma. And it's just like, there's so many things that like need to happen in order for us to reach that enlightenment, where we can't just pull like our higher selves out of our ass and like be better people. It's not like that. Like, you have to have so many terrible things happen in order, it's like the Kundalini energy, the total alignment. This concept that every spirituality has a concept of total alignment, and in Santeria there's like the 7 African powers, and all of those powers existing in your life mean that you have reached the greatness. But think about it this way: a lot of people reach that greatness and that like power because they are faced with like, oh my God, I'm drowning in my car, I have to get out of my car, I have to live. They're faced with that really scary moment. So it's like, you kind of need the fucked up stuff to happen in order to like reach the great wisdom, because you can't just like rely on that cushion for healing. And that's what I was doing my whole life. I was like looking for love, looking for this person to be with me and take care of me and help me heal. And then when I realized that was not going to happen, and maybe Claudia was right, it's not going to happen until I'm 40, and I'm not just going to be spend my 30s crying, but I kind of did. But yeah, I just think that like accessing my ancestral magic and like elevating the joyfulness was the only way that I was able to integrate the rage. Because I had these years, to be honest, of like, not like no punk, but like kind of no punk. Like I was just not in that scene really. I was trying to play music. I was like reconnecting with my band. My band was like on a hiatus, my old band, the Home Wreckers. And we were on a hiatus because it was drama. We broke up and it was very sad, but then it was like we wanted to get back together and make it work. But I wanted to do it now. And then one bandmate's like, no, we need to take time. And then when they were ready, I was just like, I need time. I'm healing. And I was connecting to my ancestors, and I was doing the Next World Tarot. And I was just kind of really focused on like queer people of color and magic, and how that can be in my life and be more important than punk. Because and I got a reading from this really amazing person who like this person like named my great grandma, and was like really intense moment of like me being like, oh damn, like I like this stuff's real, like I need to get out of my angry shell. But this person was like, you know, Caridad de Cobre or Oshun, they gave you punk. Like they were like, this bitch is not gonna go, you know, to like the spirit circle with the women. Like she's gonna go, you know, to the punk show and dye her hair green. And you know, when I was 16 and stuff, and I really needed healing. And so this reading, this person was just like, these you know, this anger is part of your magical healing, and that's what we all need to remember, that the anger is just part of it. And as long as you just let it happen, and don't let anyone silence you and make you feel like you're, you know, gaslight you and make you feel like you're being delusional, because you're usually not. You know, rage is real, even if you're you know, being reactionary towards a trigger and not somebody actually being a jerk off. That trigger is real. So like exploring that trigger and that pain, even if you're not gonna like write this person an email and be like, that thing you did was fucked up, even though it wasn't that thing. Like, you know, you're not gonna like go call them out or whatever, but you're gonna explore your rage. And it's very important for all of us to do that and take ourselves seriously, because sometimes nobody else will.
Thank you, Christy. I love that punk was given you as like a goddess gift. That's awesome.
Yeah, that was one of the most amazing readings I ever had by a witch named Jade Fair, who practices magic in the West Coast.
I love that. Thank you, Christy. So I have a question for all presenters. So feel free if this resonates with you, if you have something to say. So this person shared, I have always found myself difficult to know. I have trouble understanding myself without some external thing to reflect back to me. I'm relatively new to astrology, tarot, and all witchcraft, and I'm largely using it for the purpose to better understand myself. I'm wondering if the amazing presenters have anything to say about my using witchy stuff for this purpose. Are there any problems with me doing this, or anything I should look out for? Do any of you have reactions or thoughts you'd like to share about that?
I have some, or I just spoke though. I don't know if anyone else, but I have backfired many of my practices where I participate in rituals that are not meant for me. But I do them because my friends are like, yo, no, you got to do this. It was so awesome when I did this. Blah, 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 blah. Like, you know, you just got to put it in the freezer and then stand in the circle 5 times. You know, it's just like these really intense rituals that are part of my ancestral magic, and they're part of, you know, my culture. But they're not for me because I did them in a very messy way where I just really wanted my ex to process with me. But instead of like accepting the fact that they were not, and healing, you know, which is what I eventually did. Eventually we processed, and it was wild and weird, but and I do think that the magic I did pushed us together. It was so real, it was so magical, but it pushed us together when we were not ready. So I just think that a lot of the time, kind of like forcing a magical connection, whether to yourself or your ex or your crush or your boss or your roommate, when the other person isn't ready, or when your body isn't ready, could be a little traumatizing. And honestly, like, that's why I went off before on punk and having this other thing, because I knew I wasn't ready for it. And I bought all these like Santeria books. I bought all these books about Cuban, you know, magic, the history of everything. And I learned about it in this very surface way. Like, this is an important story about, you know, my ancestors, about the transatlantic slave trade, about colonization of Cuba. Like, it's so important to know all this, but it didn't sink into my body to the point where I felt entitled to practice the magic until I was like 31-ish. But, you know, and I just think it's important for us to not feel entitled to everything, and to just, but it's trial and error sometimes. I feel like something might feel right for you at the time, and then you realize it's not. And then but learning by a mistake or something, or by a wacky, you know, moment that the witchy stuff, as you mentioned, backfires or gets a little wild, then you learn from that. Like, I think I was meant to do all those spells. I broke my refrigerator with one, and I had to my landlord got me a new fridge. So yeah.
Thank you, Christy. Krista, it looked like you had something you wanted to say too.
Yeah, I totally agree with everything that Christy said. I think that no, I don't think there's a problem with you using witchy things or tarot and astrology to know yourself, because ultimately I think that that's one of the greatest parts about it. When it comes to things to look out for, I think that it is very valuable. And you know what? No, I think it's absolutely necessary. Beyond valuable, I think it is a requirement. When you are learning about all of what is real in the world and what is real for you in the world, when you are experiencing all these things, especially with the intention of knowing yourself, that you begin to tune into the way that your body responds to information, extrasensory information, astrology information, things that the tarot are saying, because not everything that you are going to read that says this is who you are is going to resonate with you. And so when you begin a practice of what does the truth feel like to me? What does my truth feel like to me? Then you are more grounded and more centered in your journey so that you can experience and educate yourself on all of these different things, but also know what to actually keep, know what is going to affect you, what matters to you, and be able to kind of drop off the things that don't. There's a lot under the umbrella of magic and spirituality that will try to tell you that things are the way they are and there's no space, there's no wiggle room. It's either left or white, left or white, left or right, or black or white, you know what I'm saying? But and there's a lot under the umbrella that will want to have you believing wholeheartedly what they say and letting go of your sense of yourself, your sense of reality, and any kind of critical thinking. And so what I think is also important to keep is that magic and spirituality and science, like witchcraft and science, go hand in hand. They go together. Science is the explanation. Science is, oh, we figured this out. We figured out how it works in here, but it doesn't take away the magical aspect of it. So if somebody is sharing something, or you're reading a book, or you pull some cards and they automatically make you feel outside of your body, or they make you feel upset or dark in a mood that is not like you, you do not have to accept those things as your truth. Magic, tarot, astrology, they're tools. They are not rules. I did not come up with that language. But I will
I'm
not
still learning that. It's so hard.
Yeah.
It's so hard to learn that.
Like we get
Absolutely.
scared about things like eclipses or Mercury retrograde and stuff like that. But baby, if you don't want that to matter to you, if you don't want it to apply to you, then take a step back. You don't have to, it's voluntary in a certain degree. In a certain degree, it's not, but that's more complicated than we have time for. But you don't have to stress yourself about things that you just learned about. Like, just sit back and experience. Like, there's so much amazing things. You're going to find so much. You're going to experience so much, and you will have the tools and the language to understand yourself. But you've got to be able to let go of some of the stuff that just does not sit with you.
Mm-hmm.
That's my advice.
Thank you, Krista. And I kind of wanted to, I liked how you said magic and science being interconnected. And I wanted to pose this question to Alice and sort of like twist it a little bit, because in your book, Post-Colonial Astrology, like you're very much examining political influences in magical systems such as spirituality. So I guess I'm curious to hear your thoughts on like, what do we miss out on when we're not conscious of how politics influences the way that we relate to astrology or any other spiritual practices?
Yeah, I think we miss a lot. And the reason is because I think that I think that astrology, it's a language that's like eroding. And so what keeps it alive is your practice of it. And so what keeps it alive is like your curiosity about yourself. It's actually really, really hard to be curious about yourself. And that includes being curious about what harm am I creating for the world, being curious about what's my actual experience of something. So all of these things, all of these questions, they're pretty political.
And why do you think it is difficult to be curious about yourself? What do you mean by that?
I think the reason why it's difficult to be curious about yourself is because there's like a lot of collective amnesia about history. Yeah, there's just a lot of what's been like just kind of like, yeah, hidden or like forcibly forgotten about.
That makes sense. Well, I'm going to stop us there, but thank you so much to our presenters for your insight and for those of you that post questions to them as well. And I also just want to thank you all for letting me participate in this space. It was very eye-opening and informing, and I feel really good right now. I don't know about y'all, but I'm feeling the magic of this space. So I'm going to go over to Caitlin to wrap up the event.
Yes, oh my goodness. I cannot believe it's been an hour and a half in this space. I could stay the rest of the night, which I guarantee you I've never said about Zoom before. I want to just really emphasize those thanks and extend them as well to Cassidy for being such a top-notch moderator tonight and carrying us through. Krista, Christy, and Alice, just beautiful work. Please go check out all of their websites and all of their work. I couldn't be happier to bring together this crew. And of course, Rachel Picken, our curator of Homoscopes. I'm going to drop our link one last time. Please check out the exhibition. It's live today. And I want to extend a very special thank you to those of you from the movement, from the publications in the 1970s, and everybody who is on the call who assisted in this process. We couldn't have done it without you. And the fact that you're here tonight just really makes my heart swell. So thank you very much. We have only just opened the show. It will be up through the autumnal equinox in September. So we hope to organize hopefully more events around the exhibition. We would love to do that. So please keep an eye out and do reach out if you have any ideas about how to build off of this. As Rachel mentioned, we want this to be a starting point. So thank you to our guests and thank you to everybody for coming tonight. I'm going to play a little music to wind us down.